One of the things that's of very importance worldwide, and we should talk worldwide because it affects us here, is globalization. Globalization was started really with Reagan, was continued with Bill Clinton, has continued to this day, is written about extensively by Tom Friedman, New York Times. There's a book that's relatively new by David Smick, S-M-I-C-K. It's called, instead of The World is Flat, where everybody can work together, the world is curved. And he's been a financial advisor to world presidents and for many years. And what he says is what globalization has done, it's made the financial markets uncontrollable. The Fed, who raises or lowers interest rates, who used to be able to control things in this country, is inept, and they admit that. We can no longer control things by raising or lowering interest rates. He gives an example that in Asia, much of the money is controlled by the families, the housewives. They're all on the internet. Asia is our seller of things to us. They loan money to us, so we pay interest and then buy their stuff. We're the big borrower. If they hit the right button and moved all their finances at once, the Japanese housewife, it would totally upend the whole financial world. I mean, you talk about Greece or somewhere like that being a domino effect. This would not be a domino. This would be like the Jolly Green Giant stepping on top of our whole financial system. Because things can move so rapidly, we have a double-edged problem. We want there to be liquidity, we want there to be money for people to do new projects, but it can shift. You can have an industry in a country in Southeast Asia, a textile industry that's trying to develop with globalization, and they can't put any tariffs on, they can't protect their industry till it grows. You can import goods, cheap goods from China, ruin the industry. You can put your money in quickly, pull it out, you bankrupt the country, and you've left. So the financial transaction market has to be regulated, it has to be taxed. There's many things that we can do to raise revenue. A very controversial area is our fossil fuel. We need to have incentives to develop alternative fuels. Fossil fuel is going to burn, it's going to pollute our environment, it's going to be a destroyer of many things we treasure in the American economy. One of the suggestions by Robert Reich, he was the labor secretary under Bill Clinton, in his book Aftershock, was to tax fossil fuel. Well, that's not a popular position because it's going to raise fuel prices for the consumer. But we have to think about clearly what we need to do to incentivize the development of other power. In the future, there's a book called The Next 100 Years by a man named George Friedman, and he tries to take what's happened in the past and go forward. He says in the future, 50 years from now, 30 years from now, there's going to be solar power in space. It's going to meet our needs. But what we have to look at today as representing people and managing the economy is a bridge to get there. That's many of our problems. Many of our problems will be very different because of technological advancement. What we've got to look at today is how do we get there? How do we not destroy what we have and still have energy? How do we keep things reasonable expense? So your politicians are your managers. But if your managers aren't taking the time to understand these issues and aren't taking the time to explain them to you, then they're not doing their job. There's huge issues which haven't even been talked about. Longevity. It's predicted in the next 3 decades, people's longevity will be doubled. This will have a tremendous influence on how we treat each other, on what we need to do with our population. There's huge issues. Nobody even says boo about it. You need people in the legislature that are not only thinking about these things, but are talking about them. Iran, you know, the Prime Minister of Iran said something that had some sense to it, although people go, oh my God, it's another oh my God issue, how could that be? He said a long time ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, after World War II at Yalta, where the powers that won, Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt, they supported the development of Israel. Now I'm Jewish, okay, and my brother and sister have lived in Israel. But my homeland, to me, is not in Israel. It would have been in Germany. What would have made a heck of a lot more sense at that time would have been to put the Jewish homeland in Germany. Because, there were still a few German Jews around that got out. There were 6 million of us that were killed there. That would have made a lot of sense from fairness. It would have made a lot of sense from what was done. Putting the Jews back in a major way into the Arab world is like putting a sty in the eye of the Middle East. Why did we do it? We did it to have an enclave that we could control Middle East oil. There's a Pulitzer Prize winning book called The Prize by Yurtsin. Talks about how oil dominated the last 150 years of our politics. People have no awareness of that, and if I say that at the Jewish Community Center, they're going to say, well, you know, I'm certainly all for the state of Israel existing at this point and us supporting it, but there needs to be a different relationship there too. Iran is doing what's logical for Iran to do, as is North Korea, as is many other countries. If we have 9,000 atomic bombs at our disposal and we are the superpower developing star battle stations in space, other countries are going to say, well, what is our alternative? If the United States develops these things, we have nothing to say except yes. People are not going to do that. People want to be independent. So they're going to develop their own nuclear weapons. We are promoting this. We are promoting things that are not being talked about. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, what we have to do. One of the problems with the military is we sell our latest products or give them to other countries, and then we say, well, now we have to develop the next stage of products because they may bring those products to fight with us. Well, maybe we need to develop Star Wars, and maybe we need to do some of this stuff, but we need to be thinking about what are the side effects, the unintended effects of what we're doing. What should we do with Iran? We've got to do with Iran what we have to do with the rest of the world. We have to, America is a leader. From the time that we formulated our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, the time we came over for freedom, we had very good thinking about humane treatment of each other. We've got to be leaders in leading the world to a world kind of cooperation in government. The other side of it is everybody's going to go for their self-interest and be a barbarian, and whoever has the biggest club is going to win. But if you look at books like Jared Diamond, who wrote the book Collapse, who writes about cultures over centuries, people do things because they fear being cut off from their basic resources. People individually and as countries want to survive. If they see a threat to their survival, as in World War II, Japan saw its oil being cut off from Indonesia. Japan has to survive on fossil fuel. It has none of its own. And so what did they do? They attacked Pearl Harbor. They didn't attack Pearl Harbor to take over our country. They did it to put us on notice, to try to get some sort of leverage in the world. We've got to develop a world community. We've got to support efforts to do that. We can't be pulling out of the UN. We can't be pulling out of Kyoto agreements on environment. We have to be leaders in this. We have to have some trust. Where does that come from? Well, as voters, we're going to either say to our politicians, we are fearful, we want to build walls, we want to build double walls on the border, we want to keep everybody out, we want to have a super powerful military that everybody resents and be everywhere in the world, or we want to be neighbors. We want to work in reasonable ways. We want our security, we want our safety, but we're going to work and use what we know to have the world cooperate. And if a country needs resources, we're going to find a way for them to have resources, and they're going to pay us for us. Now, the last kind of the extension of that is our biggest industry right now is police. We're the Roman legion for the world. We're out there everywhere. In the Roman times, the world was, Europe, Asia, Africa, and they were everywhere. We're everywhere now. We don't get paid for it. We can't afford it. So, my solution to that one, if that's what we want to do, if we're going to be the militaristic ruler of the world and police everybody and keep the world calm by being in control, then we better get paid for it. And if we're not going to get paid for it, we better rethink the whole issue. The more that I study and learn and talk to people, the more I see these problems as connected. And the more I see them using as brick brats that one side throws against the other instead of saying, oh, wait a minute, let's step back and see what the common interest is here. What is the common interest? The common interest is people to have safety, resources to raise their family, and be able to lead their lives and have opportunity. And that is universal, whatever religion, whatever country, no matter what. We have not set our what we want to accomplish clearly, and that's the politician in discussion with the voters' job. Healthcare should be for everyone. Everyone needs healthcare. Everyone has to have healthcare managed. Everyone has to participate in their healthcare, be responsible for what they do to make it work. But we have not set the incentives for the healthcare industry so that people know, doctors, insurance companies, payers, regulators know what to do. Healthcare can be looked at as one big company. It's not a single payer necessarily, but when a big company like Standard Oil says the drilling, the retail, the this and that all has one motive, it's profit. When we look at the U.S. healthcare, It's to keep people healthy. And we can measure that. I measure it every day. Every day I see somebody, I make an assessment of how that person is doing. I can put it in numbers, it can go into a computer, it can be measured, and it can be the basis upon which I am rewarded or not rewarded as a healthcare provider. And if I have that reward, and my insurance company has that reward, and the regulators have that reward, and the patients too have that reward, all of a sudden we're going to be talking to each other in a totally different way. Totally different way. And healthcare costs are going to drop, and healthcare is going to get better. And it really is the same principle for whether it's your family, or whether it's the nation, or whether it's the world community. When people agree on what they want to do, they can get together and they can arrange ways to do it that work. That's the major problem we face at this point.